is the most inspiring thing I ever said to you?
Don't be an idiot. Changed my life. Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing.
Welcome back to Christendom and the World. I'm your host, Pastor Andrew Preuss. Today, I would like to talk about dating, and specifically how we can see advice for dating in the book of Proverbs. Now, the reason why I want to talk about the issue of dating is because it is an important issue that pertains to the three estates. We've been talking about the three estates in previous episodes. And just to review, the three estates are the three outposts that God has established on earth that shape the duties that we carry out, that God has called us to carry out. And we can see this in the table of duties at the end of the catechism. And if you just read pretty much any of the epistles in the scriptures, there are usually sections where they get into the duties. Husbands and wives, masters and servants, those in civil authority, and those who are subjects, and then people in general. And of course, you have preachers and hearers. And so the table of duties is really about how to carry out authority. And this is really what's going on then in dating. Dating is, we can look at it as just this little thing. And, we joke about it, and, people, we can joke about the idiosyncrasies of boys, idiosyncrasies of girls. And yet all of these things are very important, and they have, very long-term consequences. And so when we consider dating, it's helpful for us to consider it as part of the overall scope of carrying out your duty, carrying out authority, right? And so I'd like to talk about dating, and in light of not being a fool, dating being a pursuit of wisdom, a pursuit of knowledge, a pursuit of understanding. And the thing about wisdom is that wisdom is something that it's both transcendent in that it comes from above, but it's also practical. So you're not going to get wisdom just by, watching a video that tells you advice on dating. You're not going to get wisdom just from reading a book. Wisdom is something that's practiced, it's exercised, it's repeated again and again and again. You fail at it, and you learn from your mistakes, but all the while you are learning to fear God. And so that practical part of wisdom is really teaching you to rely upon the true wisdom that cometh down from above, the wisdom revealed by God in his Son, Jesus Christ. And so we can, in a very crass way, when we talk about dating, we can talk about how not to be stupid. And don't be stupid. That is actually really good advice, and it really is at the elementary level of advice for any type of life endeavor, but especially when it comes to dating. So the first thing that we can say is don't be a fool. Don't be stupid. As a certain character says,
Whenever I'm about to do something, I think, would an idiot do that? And if they would, I do not do that thing.
Yeah, and that's actually really good advice. Dwight said it changed his life, and he always applies it to himself. Don't be an idiot. Don't be stupid. Now, this can be spoken in a very crass and unhelpful way, but it can also be taken to heart if we understand, well, what does it mean to be stupid? What does it mean to be a fool? Well, at the heart of it, at the beginning of it, it means not to fear God, not to respect God, not to consider that God is your maker, he is your redeemer, he is the one who calls you out of darkness, he is the one who promises you eternal life, he is the one who forgives you of your sins, and that's why he is feared, because he has the authority to throw you in hell. And so to remember that, to keep that in mind, is the beginning of not being stupid, not being a fool. You think of the parable that Jesus gives of the 10 virgins. 5 are wise and 5 are foolish. 5 are stupid. What makes them stupid? What makes them foolish? It's not that they're unintelligent necessarily. It's not that they just lack certain smarts, like they're not good at math or something like that, or they have a low GPA. What makes them fools, what makes them stupid is that they don't do the thing that is obvious. And that is they don't carry with them that extra oil for their lamps. They think that somehow their lamps are going to be fine without bringing oil with them. Like their lamps are just always going to be burning. So a fool is someone who goes and does something that is so obviously stupid, when if he would have not done that stupid thing, things would have been fine. So one example that comes to mind when speaking of movie references is in that movie Austin Powers. Have you seen that movie? You hate that movie. Yeah. That's fine. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I just remember this one scene where, it's a spoof on, it's a satire spoof on 007, James Bond. And he's at a casino and he's playing blackjack. And in the rules of blackjack, you need to get as close to 21 without going over. And so the guy, he's playing against this other guy, and the guy keeps saying, hit me, which means, the dealer's supposed to give him another card. Hit me, then he's at like 15 or 17 or something like that. And then he says some really high number and he says, hit me. And everyone is kind of shocked because it's really risky because he could go over. And then he says, I like to play dangerously. So then Austin Powers then is playing it, and he just keeps saying, hit me, hit me, hit me. And then it gets to 21. He's at 21. He's won already. He's already won the game. And then he says, hit me. And the dealer says, sir, you're at 21. And then he says, I too like to live dangerously, right? And it's funny, it's funny because he's being an idiot. He's being stupid. He's being a fool. He's already got it, and he's just throwing it away to prove some point that actually isn't proven. And that's really, so this is where, a lot of times comedy can be very helpful to help us examine ourselves. So the Proverbs, so let's get into the Proverbs. The Proverbs are written by Solomon, and they're written for his son. He keeps addressing his son, and he's trying to prepare his son for life. And specifically, he's trying to prepare his son to rule well. But we have to start with that first verse, and we're not going to go verse by verse throughout the Proverbs because that would take forever. But if you go to that first verse, it begins by saying the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Mishle Shlomo ben Dawid melech Yisrael. That first word there, Mishle, the Proverbs. Okay, that word mashal in Hebrew, it means proverb or it means parable. We first see it pop up in Numbers chapter 23, where Balaam is hired by the Moabite king Balak to curse the people of Israel. And Balaam then takes up his discourse, or his mashal. And in other words, what he's doing is he's prophesying whatever the Lord gives him to prophesy. And so a mashal is a kind of prophecy. It's a kind of, it's a parable, proverb. It's a dark saying, a hidden saying. So a word that I like to use is an enigma. And it's and in other words, it's something that is conveying a deep truth, but it's hidden and it's ready to be revealed. So we had an episode a while back where we talked about the difference between a mystery and a secret, right? The devil uses secrets, and his entire goal is to hide everything from you in order to deceive. But God reveals mysteries. So he reveals his truth to you in a way that's hidden from the wise and the prudent, as Jesus says. That's why he speaks in parables, in order to reveal it to the simple. And so in order to not be a fool, you should not be wise in your own eyes. And that's one of the things that the Proverbs tell us. So the Proverbs are filled with all sorts of good practical wisdom. But we got to keep in mind that the Proverbs are a giant parable. They're a giant enigma. And the thing about a parable is the parable is about the kingdom of God. This is why it's significant of how it begins. A parable, or the parables, or the Proverbs of Solomon. And what does it identify Solomon as? The son of David, king of Israel. Son of David is a messianic title. God promised through the prophet Nathan that David's son would build an everlasting temple, and that he would establish an everlasting kingdom. And so when Jesus comes, they're saying son of David. They're calling him son of David. Well, that's a title for the Messiah, for the anointed one, for the Christ. Solomon served as a shadow of this coming son of David. And so the mashal, right, the proverb, the parable, the enigma, is meant to teach something much deeper than simply the everyday practical wisdom. And yet at the same time, it is also teaching you everyday practical wisdom. When I was about 15 years old, my brother Christian told me to read the Proverbs. And he was, he's my older brother, and he wanted me to get wisdom. He wanted me to, to grow up, I guess, and to be able to read good stuff. And he was looking out for me, and he said, you should just read the Proverbs. And I read the Proverbs, and I found them to be very easy to read, in the sense that they're just, it's like pithy statement after pithy statement for the most part. But I also found it to be very difficult to read. And the reason why it was difficult for me to read was because it condemned me so often. I mean, it would talk about, look at the ant. Consider the ant, how he works very hard. Don't be a sloth, right? A little folding of the hands, a little resting of the eyes, and then poverty overcomes you like a thief, right? Don't speak before you think, right? He who talks without thinking is a fool, right? Those kinds of things would come up again and again, and similar pithy practical pieces of wisdom would come up, and they would just expose me for what I was. And I was like, man, I don't meet up to this. And I know, and this relates. I'm going to relate this to dating in a second. But one of the things that I'll point out is that the chapter that especially is difficult for a lot. I've noticed for a lot of women, and even very pious Christian women, is Proverbs chapter 31. And we're going to get into that at the end of this segment. But Proverbs chapter 31 has this poem that closes the book of the Proverbs that talks about a virtuous wife, a virtuous woman. And it goes and just describes all these amazing things that she does, that she considers a field and she buys it. Her kids are always well clothed. She gets up in the middle of the night and provides for her family. And I can see how a woman who really does fear the Lord and wants to do what is pleasing to God and for her husband can read this and be overwhelmed and think, well, I don't meet up to that. And just in the same way that when I read the Proverbs, I thought, man, I don't meet up to this. It's so much law. And yet that's the point. That really gets to the point, because at the very beginning of the Proverbs, you get into Proverbs 1, verse 7, and I got my Bible open here. So Proverbs 1, verse 7, it says, "Fearing the Lord is the best way to know anything, but fools despise wisdom and training." Right? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But the stupid people, the fools, despise this. They they don't care about wisdom and training. It's they're like, Beavis and Butthead who just laugh at everything, and yet they want to score. They want to get the fruit of labor that they're not willing to do, and they don't even know how to do it because they can't just sit and listen. But notice here what it says right after this in Proverbs 1. Proverbs 1 verse 7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." And then in verse 8 it says, "My son, listen to your father's criticism and don't neglect your mother's teaching." So what we find here in the Proverbs is that at the heart of it all is to learn the fear of God. And part of learning the fear of God is learning how much you do fall short. And keep in mind that this wisdom is practical wisdom. It's wisdom that you learn through mistakes, but then also going back, and your ear does not grow weary of listening to the instruction. And that can only happen by faith. That can only happen if you have confidence that you're not condemned. Right? So when I read the Proverbs when I was 15, if I didn't know that my sins were forgiven, I would have completely despaired over it, or I would have tried to reinterpret it in such a way that made me look good, while sort of lowering the bar for myself and ignoring the fact that I do speak out of place. I don't work hard enough. I'm not always diligent. Often not diligent in listening to good instruction. But it really does begin with this. It begins with this fear of God and recognizing that you fall short. But then you find glittered throughout the Proverbs these statements that are nice nuggets of the gospel. So you have wisdom speaking. Right? So first of all, wisdom, and keep in mind, this is a parable. So all the Proverbs are a parable about wisdom. And wisdom represents Christ. Okay, so it's a parable about Christ. So just like I mentioned the parable of the 10 virgins, who is Christ in the parable of the 10 virgins? Who ends up coming? Who are they waiting for? The bridegroom, yeah. They're waiting for the bridegroom, right? And so the bridegroom in that parable is Christ. Well, who's Christ in the parable of the Proverbs? Wisdom is. And yet wisdom is portrayed as a mother and as a sister and as a wife, right? So that's how wisdom is portrayed. As a wise mother, a virtuous sister, and a virtuous wife. And so let's take a look at some of these nuggets that are early on. So in Proverbs chapter 3, in verse 5, it says, "Trust the Lord with all your heart and don't depend on your own understanding." And then skipping ahead, verse 11, "My son, don't reject the Lord's training or get disgusted with his correction." And then verse 18, she, that is wisdom, who is portrayed as like a wise mother, she is a tree of life for those who hold her, and she makes happy those who cling to her. And then going on to chapter 4, verse 5, he says, he's talking to his son. He says, "Get wisdom, get understanding. Don't forget what I tell you or turn away from it." And verse 11, verse 13, "Cling to wisdom and don't let her go. Keep her because she is your life." So here we see that wisdom is portrayed as not merely the law that gives you things to do, but wisdom is portrayed as that which gives you life, which is a tree of life for you. And what this really culminates or hits its kind of tip in chapter 8, where wisdom is speaking. And this also, comes up in chapter 9 and in other places as well. But wisdom is speaking and wisdom is crying out. And you know, in chapter 8, verse 13, you have wisdom saying that the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. So this is at the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, and that is to hate evil, to turn away from evil, and not just to like not walk in it. I mean, that's certainly talked about in the Proverbs, but to develop an attitude against it, to be disgusted with evil, to be disgusted with falsehood. So that's what the fear of the Lord is. And then in chapter 8, verse 22, wisdom then begins to speak about her beginning. And yet wisdom is, and keep in mind, wisdom is a parable, is spoken as a parable for Christ. And so Christ is really the one who's speaking. And so Christ says, the Lord got me at the beginning of his ways. The Beck translation translates this as, the Lord became my father at the beginning of his way, which is really what that means. But keep in mind how he says, the Lord got me at the beginning of his ways. Well, when you go back to chapter 4, and Solomon is saying to his son, get wisdom, get understanding. This word get is the Hebrew word kana, which name? Can you think of the word kana? What name in the Old Testament does that remind you of? You got it. Yeah, that's right. Cain. Because, and that's what Eve named Cain after she said, I got a man, the Lord. She believed that she had given birth to the Savior. So she says, I've gotten a man, the Lord. And so she names her son Cain. And now she was wrong about Cain. He turned out to not be the Lord at all, very far from it. And yet it shows that she understood that the goal of all of life is to get the Lord, to get wisdom. And so here we see wisdom saying, the Lord, that is the Father, got me at the beginning of his ways. This is describing the eternal eternal begetting of the Son, that the Father has begotten the Son from all eternity. He got him from all eternity. And this is exactly what we are admonished to do, to get wisdom. Well, what's the beginning of that? Fear him who is the source of wisdom from eternity, right? So what does this all have to do with dating? Well, when we talk about dating, we're really talking about making wise decisions and following wisdom. So dating is just another, it's maybe a smaller version of ruling as a king. Now, today, people might think of that as kind of strange, like, oh, well, you know, you're not supposed to like rule over a girl, right? And if a guy showed up to, now you're already dating someone, but let's say you were single and some guy came up to you, Hannah, and said, you know, I want to rule you, right? And so you want to go out for coffee so I can be your king? How would you react? You'd be a little bit weirded out. But why would you be weirded out by it? You'd be weirded out by it not because the guy is showing confidence or showing, some kind of determination to be a leader. You'd be weirded out by it because he has not proven himself to be a king, right? Because really, you do what, when you get married someday, Hannah, do you want your husband to lead? Yeah, you do. Now, you've been raised right, but I think that women naturally want that. They also want, and I think naturally, they want a man who is kind and who understands and can listen to them and is and is compassionate and all that kind of stuff. but they also want him to take the lead. This is simply true. That's how God has designed us. So when the strange guy walks up to you and says, I want to take you out take you out on a date because I'm going to be your king, and he's being really awkward and weird about it, the reason why that weirds you out is not because he's being masculine. It's because he hasn't proven himself at all. And this is why the beginning of wisdom is to fear the Lord. Because when you fear the Lord and you begin with listening to your parents, that teaches you patience and humility, that you need character development before you can just go and assert yourself to be the king. It reminds me of what my brother Paul and I jokingly call our favorite movie, because it's totally not our favorite movie, called like Shadow Heart, I think, or Shadow Horse. I can't remember. It's one of those. Just terrible movie, because what they do, it's about this guy who's a bounty hunter. It's a Western. He's a bounty hunter, and he's it opens up with him like delivering these guys that he just caught. And then they say, well, you guys are lucky that this guy didn't do more, didn't do more to you. You're lucky that he didn't like beat you up or, rough you up more, because he's really a hard-nosed bounty hunter. He's really a tough one. And so you're thinking, oh, okay, so it's asserted right off the bat that this guy is like a really, tough, rough and tumble kind of bounty hunter. And yet, the entire movie, you never see him do anything. And even at the very end, he doesn't do anything. There's no development at all. There's no proving to me at all that this guy actually is like, a Clint Eastwood. So that's the thing, is that if you can't just go and, one of the dating advices that you might get is like walking up to a girl and just being assertive. There's something to that, of course, but you can't just over assert yourself without proving yourself, without being tested. Now, at the same time, the opposite error that a lot of guys will make is, now let me give you another scenario. So let's say you're single, and some guy just is your friend, and he just hangs out with you, and then he's waiting around for you to discover that you like him. Now, and you maybe like hanging out with him, and he's nice, and he might buy you stuff. But what are the chances are that you'll end up discovering that, oh, well, this guy, I'm really meant to be with him? Are the chances high or low? They're low, yeah. And yet, now be honest. What are the chances that you are going to discover that he actually likes you and wants to date you? Now, it might be different for every girl, but be honest. Do you think they're high or low? They're low. So you're probably going to go along thinking that he's just a nice guy and he's my friend, right? Yeah, because you're a girl. And that's how most girls are. It's like, oh no, he's my friend. I can just be friends with my buddy, my buddy Gary or whatever his name is. And we always hang out and we go shopping together, whatever, go on walks together, and he can always listen to me, and he's always so nice. And he's thinking, oh, well, if I just show her that I can listen to her well and just be nice to her, then eventually she's going to come around and she's going to like me. That's the opposite, the opposite mistake. He's being just as stupid as the guy who came up to you and said, hey, come out on a date with me. And in fact, I would say that first guy has a better chance of going out with you than the second guy, who's just going to be sort of, following you around and being, showing his heart and stuff like that. And the reason why that guy is making a mistake, that second guy, is because he's not being assertive. He's not recognizing that, okay, in order to be able to date a girl, I need to actually be a man. I need to actually be assertive. So what do? what's my advice to guys? I'm going to focus on the guys here. And, this advice, hopefully some girls can learn something from this as well. Well, this is what I would say is, again, dating is really just one small part of the whole table of duties. Okay? So your table of duties has to do with your various stations in life. That has to do with the various organic relationships and responsibilities that God has given you, where God has placed you. Well, who are the first people in your life to which you owe a responsibility? The first people. Well, let's go through the 10 commandments. First commandment, love God. Okay. Second commandment, don't take God's name in vain. Third commandment, remember the Sabbath day, so find rest in God. Are we going to get to neighbors? What do you get in the fourth commandment? Honor your father and your mother. Yeah, so your parents are the very first ones. And now they're not the last ones. We don't want to just have like an arrested development where you never leave your father and mother. But your parents are those first neighbors that you have, where you practice these skills of responsibility, of doing your duty. And this is why the Proverbs begin with son of David, and don't neglect the wisdom of your father, the correction of your father and of your mother. Now, what goes on from there then is your siblings. Right? So the way the Proverbs speak is the Proverbs will talk about wisdom as like a mother, but then the Proverbs will also speak of wisdom as like a wise sister. And so we see this in Isaiah 7, verse 4. It says, "Tell wisdom you are my sister, and call understanding your relative." And so some practical application to this is get to know your own family. The way that you treat your sister is going to translate into how you are able to talk to other girls and how you will treat them. And you and if you don't have a sister, okay, there are other girls in your family or, in your extended family. And so those are the people that God has given you a responsibility toward already right now. And so the way you treat them is, you love your neighbor as yourself. You treat them with respect, but also get used to talking with them about things that are beyond just, your own, special little interests that have nothing to do with anyone else. So in other words, talk theology with them, talk politics with them, talk about the things going on in the world, apply wisdom with them, practice applying it with them. And what you'll find then is with your sisters and also then with your brothers, and that really that's something that you probably have the most practice with, especially if you have brothers. You're going to learn how to talk to friends. And so what's going on here is that you're developing a friendship, you're practicing virtue within your kin. And that is training you and giving you the confidence to be able to speak to anyone. So one piece of advice that I've given to young men and women, and especially young men, is, okay, you're on the prowl. So for a young man, you're on the prowl. You want to find a girl. Well, make good friends and start with the friends that you have. Start with your familial friends, right? Your brothers, your cousins, your sisters, your girl cousins. Be friendly with them. Get to know them. Show them with respect. If you are always, putting down your siblings and seeing them as a bore and as annoying. Of course, they do get annoying. Familiarity breeds contempt. But if you can't learn to speak kindly and respectfully to them, you're not going to do well in the dating world or beyond. That's just a fact. Now, obviously, there are circumstances where families fall apart and there's horrible, evil sin that pops up and that tears relationships apart. And that's going to require a lot of wisdom in how you deal with that sin and how you forgive that sin. And if some people come from families that have been very abusive and where they really can't be around them lest they become corrupted. And so there's some truth in that. Bad company ruins good morals. But generally speaking, if you strive to be humble and kind and forgiving and virtuous toward those who are in your immediate sphere, that's going to do well. That's going to go well for you, for those who whom you don't know yet. So what you have here in the Proverbs then is you have some. So you have this personification of wisdom as like a wise mother, right? A wise sister, a wise wife, a virtuous wife. What is contrasted with this lady wisdom, as we could call, is what you might call Dame Folly or the strange woman, right? So wisdom is to foolishness what a good mother or a good sister or a good wife is to an adulteress, right? Or a loose woman, a woman who has no discretion, no fear of God. And so in the Proverbs, we are warned against this strange woman. So I want to read some of the passages that address this. So you first have Proverbs 2, verse 16 following. Wisdom will also save you from the strange woman, from the foreign woman with her smooth talk, who leaves the man she married when she was young and forgets the covenant with her God. Her house sinks down to death, and her ways lead you to the shades of death. None who have sexual intercourse with her come back or ever reach the paths of life. So he's warning him against fornication. He's warning him against the girl who speaks smoothly, right? She might even appear to be very virtuous. She dresses well. She doesn't use filthy language. She's smart. And yet she's not teaching. She's not going to reinforce the teaching that you have been given to fear God. She looks lightly at the covenant of marriage, right? She cares only about her own freedom and her own expressing of herself and all that kind of stuff. In Proverbs chapter 5, he returns to this strange woman or this adulterous woman. Proverbs 5, beginning with verse 3. The lips of an adulterous woman drip with honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she's bitter as a poisonous plant and sharp as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps go straight to hell. She doesn't take into account the path of life. She doesn't know where her paths wander. So she has no hope. She has nothing, no certain promise. She doesn't hold on to the certain promises of eternal life. That doesn't matter to her. Her goals are purely worldly. They have to do with just fulfilling her own desires. And such a woman is going to be the type who's going to just always be asking more and more and more from you. But she's not going to be willing to submit to you, right? She doesn't really respect you. She might give you some kind of idea that if you are really sensitive and you follow your heart and we're all equal together, then you're going to be happier. But in reality, she really just wants to rule over you. And this is really the curse that God has given on the woman. This is part of sin, right? So she's indulging in her sinful nature, which God describes in Genesis chapter 3, verse 16, when he says to the woman that your desire will be for your husband, but he will rule over you. In other words, you're going to desire to rule over him, but he's going to rule over you. And what was supposed to be a headship of grace and mercy, Adam saying, this is at last bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, now because of sin turns into a power struggle. And so you're not going to be able to avoid the power struggle by just pandering and giving in to her, and acting as if you are not really a leader and you're not there to actually be her leader. That is really just going to make you blind. And when the blind lead the blind, they both fall into the ditch, as Jesus says. So be warned against that loose woman. And the characteristic of that loose woman, besides the fact that she is totally okay with fornicating and doesn't care about the covenant of marriage, is that she doesn't have prospect, right? She doesn't have that firm hope for what is to come. Her mind is not set upon the life that God has promised. And so she doesn't fear God, right? Well, then Proverbs goes on in chapter 6. We get more of this in chapter 6, beginning with verse 24. This is talking about what wisdom does. The wisdom, again, keeps you from the bad woman, from the smooth tongue of a strange woman. Don't use your mind to lust for her beauty. Don't let her make eyes with you. A prostitute's price is a loaf of bread, but a married woman hunts with a costly appetite. And he says, can a man take fire into his lap without getting his clothes burned? What this is talking about then is warning specifically against falling into adultery with a married woman. There's way more at stake there then, because her husband is not going to take that lying down, right? And this is the thing with like all this hookup culture. How often does it happen that a man just hooks up with a girl and they think it's all about just two consenting adults doing consensual things, and then finds out that, oh, she has a husband. She's not being honest with him. And then they get all surprised, as if that should be surprising at all. Because a woman who would do that, it shouldn't surprise you at all that she would cheat on her husband. Because again, go back to the beginning of this. Who are your first neighbors? Honor your father and your mother. So when a man sees a woman, he should think, oh, I wonder if she's married. It's not just to say whether she's taken, right? Whether she's made some kind of mutual agreement to live with a man and that now he has dibs. Well, dibs on what? To lead her, right? So really what you're asking when you ask, is she married? You're asking, is she taken? Does she have a head, right? Is she submitting to someone? And this is the thing, is that even if you have this feminist dream that like, well, my husband and we're just life partners, fine. And I don't disagree with that. You're life partners. And there obviously is a mutual support there that happens in marriage. Headship is not about a man just like beating down on his wife and she doesn't contribute anything. That's ridiculous. But at the same time, if you are a woman and you are married to a man, you are by definition submitting to him. If you treat him like he's lower than you or like he's not your head, well, you're failing at that submission, but the very act of being married to him is one of submission because God has instituted marriage and we don't just redefine what marriage is. And so if you see a woman and you think, oh, is she married? That's really what you're asking is, does she have a head? Is she submitting to another man? Well, we should also then think, who's her father? Who's her mother? You have a father and a mother. She has a father and a mother. When you go and hook up with another girl, you're dishonoring not only her, you're dishonoring her head. You're dishonoring her father, and you're dishonoring her mother as well. And so you're playing with fire either way. And then in Proverbs chapter 7, this is probably the most well-known chapter in Proverbs that warns about the adulterous woman. He says, "My son, keep my word and treasure my instruction. Do as I order you and live. Guard my teaching like a pupil of your eye. Tie them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Tell wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your relative. So they will keep you from the adulterous woman, from the strange female with her smooth talk. At a window of my house I looked through my lattice, looking at the silly fellows. I saw among them a lad without much sense. That is, he was stupid. What did this stupid person do? Well, he was walking along a street near her corner and approaching her house in the twilight and the evening of the day and the darkness of the night. A woman came to meet him, dressed as a prostitute with secret plans in mind. Lusty and rebellious, her feet won't stay home. One moment she's on the street and the next she's in the square, waiting at every corner to catch somebody. She grabs him and kisses him, puts on a bold face and tells him, I have some sacrificial meat. Today I paid my vows. That's why I came out to meet you, to look for you till I found you. So what he's describing here is a woman who has said that she's paid her vows, she's made her sacrifices. And this is, an Old Testament way of saying that she's gone to church, right? Or she has worshiped the Lord. So she'll convince you that she actually is a God-fearing woman because she just went to church. She dresses the part. And he's warning him in this with very graphic picture of the seduction and the deceit of this adulterous woman. And so this is again contrasted. This is contrasted with a wise mother and a wise sister. And so let's look at a couple other passages from Proverbs. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 30. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 20. Whoa, I jumped to Ezekiel. How did that happen? Went way too far. Proverbs chapter 30, verse 20 says, This is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats, wipes her mouth, and says, I've done nothing wrong. And so eating, wiping her mouth, saying I've done nothing wrong, that's it's a parable. It's a figure of speech to say that she does her sexual morality, but then wipes herself clean, makes herself look clean, and takes no responsibility for what she has done, has no accountability. And so this is these are really just kind of what we call kind of cliff notes of advice and nuggets to keep in mind when you think of dating. Again, if you take all this and then you go and say, all right, well, I want to go find the right woman, and then I'm going to go and be like super, macho to her. And I'm going to go and say, I'm conservative and I want to be your head and I want you to submit to me. Well, that's probably not going to go well, right? Again, for the same reason that we just mentioned, because you haven't proven anything. But instead, these are things that you just simply need to keep in mind. You need to understand that when you are dating a woman, when you are pursuing a woman, that potentially what you are pursuing is someone who will rely upon you, rely upon your leadership. And so you need to consider whether she's willing to rely upon you or whether she's going to just give you this kind of smooth talking, sort of portrayal of, we're both on the same footing in every way. And so I don't need to submit to you. Now, with all that said, though, like I said before, there is some truth in that. And this is the thing with every lie. A lie is always a corruption of what is originally true, just as that which is ugly is just a corruption of beauty, and that which is evil is a corruption of good. So it is true that there is a certain level playing field. There's a kind of mutual relationship that goes on, right? So if you're the head of your wife, you're not the head of her in the way that you're the head of your children, right? Your wife is one flesh with you. So in order to receive honor from your wife, you need to show honor to her. Well, how do you show honor to her? Well, you got to consider who she is. She's God's creation. God created her in his image. She has a father and a mother, right? So she is valued by others. She has responsibilities as well. So when you discuss things like, oh, are you going to work, or what are you going to study for? Are you going to go to school? Blah, 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 blah. If you don't have to become such an idealist and say, well, you're going to do all these things, and then I'm going to do all these things, without actually discussing them and showing that you actually care about her duties, about her present duties, right? So if you care about what she does and you look at that through the prism of love for her neighbor, that she has duties and responsibilities, she submits to authorities, just like you do. And you have to carry out responsibilities. You have to submit to authorities. And you both are under the headship of God. Then that's going to be a very good way to start. And what you learn throughout all of this then is contention. One of the parts in Scripture is not contention, being content, not contention. Not like you're arguing, but you learn to be content. Contentment is what I meant to say. So you learn contentment throughout all of this. And one of the parts in Proverbs, and I can't remember exactly where it is, but it says, like, no one knows the pain of one's heart except for that one, the one whose heart it is. And this is something to keep in mind, that there's a lot of emotion that goes into dating, and there's a lot of heartbreak, and heartbreak is really just another way of saying disappointment. Like, you thought things were going well, and then she broke up with you. And so then you start singing that song by Herman's Hermits, right? That says, why do the birds go on singing, right? And then you say, don't they know it's the end of the world? It ended when she said goodbye, right? So here he thinks that this young man thinks that it's the end of the world and doesn't understand how the world can keep going on when his sweetheart just broke up with him. And it's something that's very pathetic, and we can all recognize heartbreak as pathetic. That's what it is. But also, if you go through heartbreak, there's no temptation that's overcome you that's not common to man. There's no testing that's overcome you that's not common to man. So heartbreak is not something to be, embarrassed about. I mean, it is by definition shame. That's why it hurts. That's why it's uncomfortable and people don't like it. It's like your nakedness is exposed, figuratively, I hope. But at the same time, there's no shame in admitting that you have shame and just kind of going through it and recognizing that, yeah, that's going to happen. It isn't the end of the world. The disappointments are difficult to bear. But don't make the mistake in thinking then that you need to bear your heart out. You need everyone to know how you are feeling in order for you to be able to move on. Because again, this goes back to the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. God is the one who knows the heart. He's the one who tests the heart. He's the one who teaches us to repent of our sins, to recognize our need for his salvation, for wisdom, who gives us a life. Wisdom, who is begotten of the Father, who is the Son of the Father, who gave his life for us. He's the one who is greater than our hearts. And yes, that's true even when you're going through a little bit of heartbreak. I know it's a smaller version of it. You know, there are much greater heartbreaks than like your girlfriend breaking up with you. There are much greater catastrophes that actually do feel a lot more like the end of the world than, you know, Susie isn't calling you back. But nonetheless, even with those seemingly petty heartbreaks, you learn to fear God. You learn that, okay, God gives and God takes away. And it's good to learn that early. It's good to learn that with in your family as well, to be content with what you have. And that contentment does not come about by you just pleasing yourself all the time. And this is a mistake that a lot of both guys and girls will make, is when they're in a breakup and then they get together with their friends and then they just gossip, or they just tell one another what they want to hear. They take no responsibility for anything that they've done. They get drunk, stuff like that. That's the worst thing to do, because all you're doing is you're just fleeing into your own emotions. But rather, when you feel that heartbreak or that frustration, and this might even be where you're just trying to figure out, this girl. You think, oh, she's a mystery, and might seem like a roller coaster at times. Throughout all of that, it's important, it's vital to keep in mind that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and that you stand upon the solid ground of wisdom, by whom the foundations of the earth were laid. And then you don't need to get swept away by all of the emotions going on within you. And if you can be trained in that way, to not be driven by your emotions, you're actually going to be more attractive to your potential wife, or being able to go and speak to a girl and not be rushing into it, but also not be like, passively aggressively just, following her around and not being assertive. But you learn to just talk to her in the way that you know how to talk to anyone else, firmly established in your heart on the truth. So, I mean, a lot of this dating advice is really just advice on how to live your life as a Christian, how to live within the three estates, doing your duty as a son, as a friend, as a brother, doing your duty as a citizen, right? Doing your duty as someone who is a Christian, hearing the word of God and making that habit out of, not skipping church, going to the divine service, to hear the word, to receive the sacrament, be established in your heart, be established in your hands and your feet, to walk in the ways that God's prepared for you, and confident that God's going to work it all out. And that when you fail and you see how much you fall short, that you simply learn to fear God, and that the fear of God never disappoints, because those who fear the Lord lack nothing good. In him there is forgiveness. That's why he's feared. And so this should give you confidence, humility and confidence and contentment all the while. Now, as I was mentioning, Proverbs is a parable, right? So it's a parable with this character wisdom, and wisdom is talking about Christ, the Son of God. Now we have at the very end of the Proverbs 30 and 31, we have these closing proverbs by a man named Agur and another man named Lemuel. In Proverbs 30, Agur begins to apply all of this wisdom to himself. He says, I have gotten wisdom. And then he asks, who has ascended to heaven? Right? And he says, what is his name? And what is his son's name? So he shows that it's all about knowing God. It's all about having that confidence in the Lord himself, from whom wisdom has begotten from eternity, knowing his name, knowing his son's name, knowing Christ. And then he prays this wonderful prayer where he says to God, do not deny me this. Give me neither riches nor poverty, lest if I am rich, I be full and my heart forget you, and lest in my poverty I steal and I blaspheme your name. So what he's asking there is not necessarily give me a good middle class job. That's not really specifically what he's getting at. What he's getting at is give me contentment. As St. Paul says, whether I have a lot or I have little, I can be content. I can be at peace. Because if you can be at peace and having a good conscience before God, and then living in that good conscience and learning to exercise that good conscience in your family and with your friends, in your community, that's going to pave the way for you to be able to have confidence to approach other people and get to know other people and get to know other girls. One of the things too that Agur points out in chapter 30, Proverbs chapter 30, is something that a lot of people can relate to, and there are songs that talk about this. As what's the Love and Spoonful? She's still a mystery to me, right? That's a great song. And then there's Kenny Chesney. So you're more into this stuff. Kenny Chesney. I think it was a Keg in the Closet. He says it was either Keg in the Closet or it was Young. I used to listen to Kenny Chesney when I was young, but he says, girls were still a mystery we couldn't understand, and some things never change, or something like that. Do you remember that line? Anyway, you could look it up. But this is what Agur says. He says, 3 things are too wonderful for me, and 4 things I can't understand. How an eagle makes his way through the sky, how a snake makes his way on a rock, how a ship makes its way in the middle of the sea, and how a man makes his way with a virgin. So he's saying that this relationship, a man with his virgin, this is like a man with his betrothed. So it's a woman that he is betrothed to, that is, he's contracted to be married to her. And he's really legally married to her. But he hasn't consummated the marriage yet. So this is something, we don't really have this today. People just get engaged. That's, I suppose, the closest thing we have to betrothal. But then they get married and then they consummate it right away. This would be like you're married, but you just are waiting to consummate it for whatever reason. And usually it would be something like, you're waiting for a dowry or something like that. So like Jacob would have been betrothed, to Leah and Rachel. And then, he consummates it in the tent. But we can apply this even to dating, though, and beyond, that it's a mystery. It's something that it's too wonderful for me. It's too mysterious for me. And it's interesting to see that this is in the scriptures, that he's describing it as a mystery. Now, when these songs and poets talk about girls being a mystery, right? You have, boys are from Mars and girls are from Venus, these mysterious differences. You have a great movie to watch is Shenandoah with Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart plays this father in the Shenandoah Valley during the Civil War, and his future son-in-law comes and asks for his blessing because he wants to marry his daughter. And if you just look up that scene, it's a great scene. And he gives really good advice he's a widower, and he gives advice to his future son-in-law. And so much of it is true that like you're not going to understand her, right? You can't understand her, and she might want you to understand her, but it's really impossible. She is created differently. Now, does that mean then that you don't listen to her? Does that mean that you don't have to listen to her, or you shouldn't care about her? No. You must care about her. You must give her an understanding ear, but you will not be able to feel what she's feeling, even though she might think that that's what is necessary. And this is the thing, is that women are created by God to give birth. They're created to care most about that which comes from them, whereas a man is created to care about that which is outside of him. And that's not to say that men don't care about what's in them and women don't care about what's outside of them. It's just generally to speak in this way is helpful, that a woman's priority is, her brood, right? Her children. A great poem to read is Rudyard Kipling's The Female of the Species, where it talks about how women have been endowed by God with a fierceness that's even fiercer than men, but it's not the same as the men, right? The men govern in this external way, but the women, their contention, her contention is her husband and her children. Heaven help him who denies, right? And this is true. So you do learn things about women. And the women learn things about men. You learn things about your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You learn things about your wife or your husband, but you're not going to understand each other. You're not gonna like get to the depths of each other's souls, right? That's something that is really impossible, because as the Proverbs say, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Life itself, creation itself, is a mystery. And so what this teaches us then, when you say, "Oh, well, she's a mystery to me," you can say it in kind of a jestful way, and kind of teasing a little bit, like, "Oh man, I'll never understand women. I just don't understand how they, their emotions and the ways that they talk, and I just don't seem to understand them." And women will say the same about men, and we laugh about it. And there are sitcoms that kind of have commentary on it, and that can be all fine and innocent, and we do that all the time. But we should consider that this actually does touch on something very mysterious and very true. The reason why women are a mystery to men, and the reason really even the other way around, why men are a mystery to women, is because we're created by God. And what this is meant to do is to bring us back to the beginning of the Proverbs, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. You want to understand, you want to begin to understand the enigma, you want to begin to understand the proverb, the parable, that hidden mystery. Fear God. Fear him. Who has gone into heaven? Who is he? What's his name? What is his son's name? Do you know him? Because that's the only way to knowledge. That's the only way to wisdom. That's the only way to grasping the mystery. And so then with this, you get into Proverbs 31, where Lemuel then describes the wisdom that was taught to him by his what? By his mother. And this is something that I think really did help me as I was a young man. My eyes were open for a girlfriend, and I wanted to get married someday. It was very helpful for me to have a good mother who really gave me good advice. And this is one of the main themes then in the Proverbs. Here's this father, Solomon, trying to give advice to his son, but he's also appealing to the wisdom of his mother. Honor your father and your mother. And that doesn't mean that they themselves are the source of all wisdom. No, God is, right? Your parents are going to fall short in many ways, but if you learn to honor them, that's going to set you on a much better footing to be able to find someone else to give honor to and who will honor you, and that you will both be in that station together as more than just life partners, but one flesh, and both relying upon the wisdom of God. And so you look at what Lemuel says. He gets into, his mother tells him to be careful about giving his strength to women, right? That's what his mother says to him. Don't give your strength to a woman. So in other words, don't follow her heart, right? Don't make your strength dependent upon what she's feeling. Because first, you're never going to know what she's actually feeling. It's impossible for you to truly feel what she's feeling. And second of all, you're relying on total sinking sand, and it's the blind leading the blind. You're both going to fall into the pit. Instead, use your strength to serve. Begin by using your strength to serve those whom God has put in your life already. Your family, your close friends, right? Your coworkers. Like, be an honorable person. Use your strengths for service. And don't give your strengths up into some kind of romantic abyss. That's not going to do you any good, and it's not going to do anyone else any good. And so Lemuel's mother teaches him, do not give your strength to a woman, and don't be overcome by liquor, right? Be sober and watchful. And then here is this poem, which the Proverbs end with, this poem about the virtuous wife. It says, who can find a virtuous wife or a good wife? She's far more precious than jewels. Her husband trusts her. He doesn't lack compensation. She helps him and doesn't harm him as long as she lives. She plans to get wool and flax and works with willing hands. She's like a merchant ship bringing food from far away. She gets up when it is still dark and gives food to her family and assigns jobs to her maids. She considers a field and buys it with what her hands have produced. She plants a vineyard. She puts on strength like a garment and goes to work with her arms. She sees she's making a fine profit, so her lamp burns late at night. She puts her hands on the distaff and with them holds a spindle. She opens her hands to the poor and stretches them out to the needy. She doesn't fear for her family when it snows because her whole family has double clothing. She makes quilts for herself. Her clothes are linen and purple. Her husband is known at the gates when he sits with the elders of the country. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. She dresses in strength and nobility, and she smiles at the future. She speaks with wisdom, and on her tongue there is kindly instruction. She watches well the conduct of her family, and she doesn't eat the food of idleness. Her children stand up and call her blessed. Her husband, too, sings her praises. Many women have done fine work, but you have done better than all of them. Charm deceives and beauty vanishes, but a woman who fears the Lord, she is to be praised. Give her credit for what she has done, and let her deeds praise her at the gates. Now, as I mentioned before, Proverbs 31 is often seen as very overwhelming to a lot of women, and a lot of pious women. They'll look at this and so, for example, they might look and see verse 15. She gets up when it's still dark and gives food to her family and assigns jobs to her maids. And I think most women would look at that and be like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. She considers a field and buys it. The point of this is, like, if you feel overwhelmed with this and you say, wow, I can't meet up to that standard, that's good. Because if you could meet up to that standard, then what's the point of even, listening to it? But it's good that it humbles you. It shows you that, wow, I fall short. I don't meet up to this. And so I fear the Lord, right? I need him. I need his wisdom. I need his life, that free forgiveness of sins that he gives to me through the gospel. But the other thing, though, to keep in mind is that this passage is really about adorning the role of a wife. This passage, this whole poem, which closes the Proverbs, gives your kind of final bow, your final ribbon to the entire message of the Proverbs, that wisdom is more precious than jewels. Wisdom is the greatest thing to have. And that wisdom being first that gospel of the free forgiveness of sins of Christ, who is begotten of the Father, who has given himself for us. But then also practical wisdom as this is applied to our daily lives, as we learn to fear God and to fall back upon his compassion and his forgiveness and salvation and continue to walk in the works that he has given us, knowing that he's going to work it all out. That's the fear of God. That's the beginning of wisdom. This is why this ends by saying a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised, right? So this is describing a woman who fears the Lord. And guess what? She is, these are the praises that she gets. Oh, she gets up when it's still dark, right? She buys a field. She provides for her home. She dresses in strength, right? She laughs at the future. That means she has hope, right? She has prospect. This isn't describing a woman who has been necessarily successful from the eyes of the world. No, this is describing how God sees you. This is therefore how you should see your wife. See her as the most precious thing. Show honor to her as the one whom God has created and provided for you. If this is what If this is what you learn to do, even just as a young child with your mother and your father, honoring them, honoring then your sister, honoring the women in your life, not by, sucking up to them and praising them for things that they didn't do, but showing honor to them as those whom God has created, and showing honor to them as those whom God has given duties on earth, and then taking your own duties seriously and recognizing that you're all under the providing hand of God, then that, again, is going to put you on that good footing to be able to see other people with that same kind of honor, and ultimately to see your wife in that way. And so when it comes to dating, I didn't really talk a lot about, kind of practical dating advice. But what I was talking about instead was just the basic principles to understand God's wisdom, the fear of God, and the duties to which God has placed you. And that if you are faithful in a little, then you're also going to be faithful in much. If you're faithful in the things that are right in front of you, honoring your father and your mother, striving to show honor and respect to your siblings, and not treating them as less than you, and not treating them as just this old kind of, old news that you can't wait until you move out and go to college so you don't have to be annoyed by your annoying little sister or little brother. But instead love them and meet them where they are. That's actually going to equip you to be able to date better, right? And to meet other people where they are. Now, should I give maybe just a little bit of dating advice that's more down to earth? So keeping in mind all of these things, wisdom and the Proverbs, there's a lot in learning to fear God and being content. Here's a little bit of dating advice. If you ask a girl out, ask her out for coffee. Don't ask her to a movie. Why? Can't talk. I would avoid asking her out to a heavy meal. One, you're going to have to pay a lot. And do you really want to pay a lot on this girl? You don't know yet. That's maybe like third date. But two, you're going to be nervous about like how you eat and stuff and like whether you burp and stuff like that. Coffee's perfect. Coffee or tea, whatever, coffee shops, they have everything. She doesn't like coffee. Maybe she likes lattes or cappuccinos or whatever. All right. Or juice, whatever. Take her out for coffee. It gives you an opportunity to talk. Ask her about her life, about her family, about where she's from, what church she grew up at, and get to know what she believes by getting to know what she does, what she's interested in. And you'll find that you'll come to know her very quickly in that way. If you think that you're going to get to know a girl by just, talking about your friends in your inner circle, you're actually not going to get to know her that well. You might think you do because maybe, let's say you both kind of run in the same circles. But if you're not actually asking her, like, okay, yeah, where are you from? What does your dad do? What does your mom do? And then, did you grow up going to church? And actually talk about these things, then it's going to remain very shallow. And when you do talk about these things, you're already showing that you understand and care. And that speaks a lot louder than speaks a lot more forcefully, and it goes a longer way than you trying to show that you feel what she feels. That's what people end up doing when they don't actually care about the basic duties and life and culture and daily interests that the other has. So anyway, this is my best shot at giving dating advice. I don't know. Do you have any advice for dating, Miss Hannah? No, she doesn't. She doesn't have, she's dating someone, but I think that they like each other enough. They're beyond like that coffee stage, right? But would you say would you agree with that practical part at the end there though, that go out for coffee or something like that, or go on a walk, right? Go on a walk, do something like that. Make something that is that's going to give room for conversation. And also then, this is maybe just one other thing that I'll mention. Hannah and I were talking about this before, and we both have something in common here. So Hannah has a sweetheart, but they don't live in the same town. They don't live in the same state, so it's a little bit more long distance. But they are able to see each other, once a month or so. And that's how it was for me, actually. My wife and I, we started dating. We were both in the same town going to school, but then I transferred. We were a few hours away, and I saw her about once a month. And there's something good about that. That's not for everyone, but there is something good about that. Like, you shouldn't feel you shouldn't feel like you are not getting an adequate dating experience because you live far apart. Because there's really something to say about learning to talk to one another on the phone or on whatever people talk on nowadays. Because really so much of it is about communication. Consider the first thing that Adam did when he saw his wife. What's the first thing he did? He talked. He talked to her. He said, "This is that last bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." Now, they were already married, right? But what this shows us is that, the that talking to one another, communication is really the highest thing for us to do. And to this day, I enjoy, I drop the kids off at school, I come home, and while I'm getting ready to start the day, I sit down for a while and have coffee and talk with my wife. And that's really important, and it really strengthens, your relationship, and it teaches you wisdom because you learn from one another, and it becomes a great, wonderful life filled with contentment, and teaches you to appreciate the things that God has given, both the gifts that God has given to you, but also to your wife and to your family. So anyway, next time we'll talk about something else. In the meantime, like and subscribe and share our content, and join us next time for another episode of Christendom and the World.